Hello, hello, hello. This is Marshall Goldsmith. Welcome to LinkedIn Live. We have a wonderful, wonderful show today. I'm going to briefly introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce our great friends who are here. Today's talking about leader humility and the power of being a humble leader, why that's so important for leadership today. And before we even get started, I'm going to give everyone a little challenge. I want you to think back to a time when you worked for a leader who wasn't humble. What's the opposite of humility? Arrogance. Think of a leader who was arrogant, talked down to you and talked down to other people. And I want you in the chat box to write a note. What was that like for you? What was it like to work for a leader who did not demonstrate humility, who demonstrated arrogance? And then we're going to get started, and then I want to get to some comments that you've made about what that was like for you. And for those of you who don't know me, I'll introduce myself. I'm Marshall. I'm from Kentucky, went to school in Indiana, got a PhD at UCLA. I was a college professor and dean, traveled around the world for 43 years, speaking, teaching, coaching wonderful executives like one of our guests today, and then have written or edited a bunch of books. So very, very happy to be here today. We have some spectacular guests. Our first guest, our guest of honor, is Marilyn. Marilyn is a wonderful person. She is the endowed professor of business management at Washington University in Seattle, and she's also associate dean at Seattle University. She's an expert on executive education. She's had a chance to work with probably hundreds or even thousands of leaders around the world. And her new book is called The Extraordinary Power of Leader Humility, which is just kicking butt. You're doing a great job on Amazon.com. You're way up in the top 0.1% of all books already. So, big round of applause for Marilyn. Yay! Very good. Very, very good.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
And with us today is my comrade, Alan Mulally. I love Alan Mulally, probably the greatest leader in the world in the last 20 or 30 years. Was ranked CEO of the year, #3 greatest leader in the whole wide world. I had the privilege of coaching him, which is kind of a little ironic since I learned about 100 times as much from him as he learned from me. Yet a great partner, a great friend. We've had a wonderful relationship, fantastic leader, and even better human being. So Alan, thank you for joining us. And Alan wrote the foreword.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Alan, give me a couple of good words about Marilyn. Tell me a little bit about her.
Well, Marilyn is a very special person, a very special leader, and she was the former director of the Center for Leadership Formation and Development at Seattle University School of Business. And that's where I met her, and I had the honor to be invited to join her in her teaching and her writing, and it's just been an absolutely fabulous experience. And there's not a person in the world that doesn't understand working together better than Marilyn, and the fact that she has captured the essence of that with leadership, humility, and is sharing it now is going to be fantastic for all of us.
Fantastic.
Thank you,
Marilyn,
Al.
let's get started.
Okay.
Marilyn, what inspired you to write this book? Number one, how'd you become interested in this topic?
Well, both as a leader and working with leaders, Marshall, and thank you for having me on your show, first of all. But as a leader and working with leaders, it became clear that leadership takes place in relationship. And the greatest challenge really is to get others to align around the shared goals that you have. Sometimes they're coming from lots of different directions. And so there's a challenge in that. And I had an opportunity to work with so many leaders. And you hear a lot of unsolicited comments about the people they work for. And I also had a chance to see them, sometimes to work with the heads of organizations that were sending them to our programs. And eventually I had this epiphany that there was something that we were often overlooking about leadership. And it was this idea of leader humility. And the more I worked with people and saw the importance of this, I really became inspired to write the book.
Before we get to our questions, what is leader humility? What does that mean for you? Because for some people, they kind of connect humility to a weakness. Now, I don't think that's true at all, but in your experience, number one, what do you mean by leader humility, and how do you deal with this comment of, isn't that a kind of weakness?
Well, sometimes people think of humility from, kind of how they think a person who is humble might feel, and they might think they're not very confident or that they're very meek. And that is not what leader humility is. I need you to flip it around and think of how it looks when other people are working for a leader. And so the way I define leader humility is a tendency for that leader to feel and display a deep regard for others' dignity. So it's really about respecting another person's sense of self-worth. That's all it is, but it's a big, big thing.
Now, Justin, have we been getting any comments or questions about the little challenge we gave people? What was it like to work with that arrogant leader?
Hey there, Marshall. Hello, Alan and Marilyn. Good to have you on the show. We've been receiving quite a few comments already from people all around the world, from Saudi Arabia to Argentina and everywhere in between. It looks like quite a few people joining us today. Getting things here, we're following the feed on the phone. It looks like we've got draining, frustrating, demotivating, patronizing, isolated. It didn't build my trust. It killed my performance, and on and on. And a lot of people have reinforced that message. I'm curious to ask our guest, Marshall, if I may.
Sure.
Alan, have you ever worked for a leader who was arrogant or talked down to you, and how did that make you feel?
Well, I have, and it's very demoralizing, and probably even worse. It actually limits my ability to serve and be open and try to seek to understand and seek to be understood, because I feel very humiliated. And so I learned a lot from those leaders about really the importance of leader humility.
It's interesting, Marilyn. I think we've got a couple of slides I wouldn't mind you showing. One is going to be defining humility, and then number two is how it relates to arrogance. Can we do that?
Sure. So humility is basically not arrogance. And what you see on this slide is that I see humility as being kind of a sweet spot, if you will. It's really where you want to be, where you definitely have confidence, you're strong, you have good standards, you know how to make decisions, but you also kind of know where some of your limitations are. So on one hand, you think of, Marshall, you said some people think of humility as meekness. That is not what leader humility is, and it's not where you would want to be in terms of your own confidence as a leader. But on the other hand, you don't want to stray, as you said, Marshall, all the way to arrogance. Arrogance is kind of the opposite of leader humility. So humility is really that central point, that really sweet spot where the leader is confident but very aware of supporting the dignity of others.
Very good, very good. And one of the things, Marilyn, that I always teach in our coaching process is every leader I work with, I teach to ask for input, to listen, to apologize when they make mistakes. And in essence, that to me is kind of a demonstration of humility in and of itself. And, Alan, you're a great role model of this. When I work with you, you had over and over, you would ask for input. How can I, Alan, get better? How can I learn from you? How can I improve? And, I think, I don't think anybody saw you as a weaker leader because you did that. And, Alan, one thing you've always said, which I like is, and I agree with you, you have a heart of gold, yet a backbone of titanium. So what does that mean?
Well, I've always come from a position of humility, love, and service. And I just loved working with people on a compelling vision and a comprehensive strategy, and also working together to make that happen for the greater good. And so everything about me has been to create an environment where everybody understood the vision, they understood the strategy, understood the plan, they knew the areas of special attention. And we were creating an environment that was not only smart, but it was also safe and it was also healthy. So we could deal with the issues and turn the red to yellows to green, so to speak. So this humility from the leader and the leadership team is so important, because the minute that the team does not feel safe and does not feel respected and appreciated, then you're not going to get the best of what's going on, and you're not going to get the best service from all the participants.
And by the way, Marilyn, to reinforce your great points, I mean, when Alan was at Ford, the stock went from 101 to 1840. I think it went up 1,837%. So it's not like when you have humility, you're always going to lose money here. So it's not that this is just an inherently bad idea for the bottom line of a corporation. Now, Marilyn, what's dignity mean to you? Talk about the concept of dignity, and what do leaders need to understand about this?
Well, dignity is your sense of self-worth, Marshall. It's all of the things that go into your identity that you feel have some value to you. It can also include things that you might have some shame about, that you're sort of sensitive to. But basically what leaders need to understand is that their humility, or lack of it, since I'm defining humility as regard for others' dignity, there's an interaction, there's kind of a dance between these two concepts. And if you think of something like, say, Dancing with the Stars, ballroom dancing, you have to pay attention to where your partner is, so you don't step all over their feet. Leaders who are arrogant or who lack humility are like that ballroom dance partner who are just stepping all over your feet. You don't get a flowing, good process that comes out of that. And it's the same thing in organizations. On the other hand, leaders who are aware of the sense of worth that other people have about themselves can still set really strong standards, like Alan Mulally did, but they do it in a way that really supports the dignity, the sense of worth that other people have, and it keeps them energized, so that they don't have the kinds of feelings that Justin read out that were coming from the audience, people who were feeling frustrated, demoralized, insulted, and so forth. So that's the way you have this interaction between humility and dignity.
Great. Now, I'm going to share one of my thoughts, and I want yours. I mean, one thing in working with Alan I learned is he created an environment where people didn't make snide comments, which basically is just arrogance. It's proving I'm smarter and better than you. They didn't talk down. It was not allowed, zero tolerance for bad behavior. And on the other hand, you think, well, that's good human relations, but it's also good for business. You know why? You don't waste time. All that stuff is a waste of time. And, I did a statistical correlation a few years ago, two items that don't seem to be connected with, but they are. One item was avoids destructive comments about other people, and the other item was avoids unnecessary complications. Now, you don't think about those two as inherently being connected, yet they are. Because when we do make those destructive comments, we show off, And Alan, you and I have been together where people do this. They talk down, they show off.
Yeah.
How much time is wasted? The whole thing just degenerates and they're not doing business anymore. They're just wasting time. So Marilyn, what are some of your thoughts about how positive demonstration of humility impacts getting the job done?
Well, I think that it really ties into getting other people to bring their best selves to work. When we feel respected, when we feel seen, for example, we are more inclined to want to work with that leader, to give our creativity, our best effort. And so it just creates a better outcome in terms of results. But one of the other things it does is it just improves the culture so much so that people are working together. The example of Alan setting some behavioral standards where we don't insult each other, we don't make negative comments about other people, we show respect. That creates a culture where people feel safe psychologically, and so they collaborate more, they get more done. So you get better results, but you also have a thriving organization.
Excellent, excellent. Marilyn, I think you've got slide 3 about this. Let's talk about how this relates to introducing a new leader to the team. What are some of your reflections on how your concepts relate to introducing a new leader to the team?
Thanks, Marshall. I think one of the most important things is for us all to realize that people watch leaders. They watch them all the time. And as we're watching, there are really 3 key questions that we kind of have in our minds about that new leader, or even in an ongoing way about leaders. And the first one is, who are you? And what that's about really is, what kind of person are you? What are your values? How kind of how is your ego packed up, and what's your integrity like? And the second question is, where are we going? What are you asking me to do? And is it something that I'm going to appreciate in terms of the vision you're setting, or the ethics behind the strategies you're taking to get there, you're using to get there? And then the third question is, do you see me? Do you get who I am? Do you care about that? Or do you just see me as somebody who's a cog in the wheel to do something that you might want done, particularly if that's really about your own personal gain or about a vision that I don't fully buy into? So those are 3 really important questions that leaders need to understand. And in turn, the way leaders speak and the way they behave give people the answers. People may not ask that of a leader directly, but they sure are thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. I love that one. Do you see me? Remember the movie Avatar? Yeah, that's what the blue people always do. Do you see me? Do you see me? I see you. I love that. Do you see me? Alan, one of the things you've talked about, which relates to what Marilyn is saying, is behavior. Now, Marilyn, I'm going to ask you in a second, what do leaders actually say or do that demonstrates humility? And Alan, you've talked about the difference between behavior, what you say and do, and maybe some of the other things that you don't talk about. You don't do psychotherapy and all that stuff. And I love some of your thoughts about how you deal with behavior as the key variable, not this other stuff that you can't see. Can you just briefly describe that? Because I do love it.
Well, absolutely. And Marilyn has really captured this in her new book. And at the most fundamental level, what we really are agreeing to are fundamentals behaviors that we can see. And it really relates to how we treat each other and how we want to be treated. And of course, it starts with about seeing you is, do we know what the plan is? Is it compelling? Do you see me, my part of it? Am I going to be part of it? Are you going to share with me what the issues are? Not just what's going well. And are you going to help? Is everybody going to help each other deal with the issues so we can get back on plan? One neat thing that you raised earlier that Marilyn also mentioned is the way you're treated, especially from a behavior point of view is no jokes ever. We're going to have fun. We're going to enjoy this because it's so enjoyable to do something that's going to do great things for the greater good. And so never a joke at anybody else's expense because it's never funny. And the reason it's so bad is it gets in the way of having a safe an environment where people can feel like they can really share what's going on. Because if they think they're going to be a victim, then they're not going to share what the real situation is. And you're not going to be able to perform at the highest level individually or as a team.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Now, I think we've got slide 4. If Justin or Brent, you could put up slide 4 now. And Marilyn, what exactly do leaders say or do that in a positive way demonstrates humility? So we can be discussing that.
Sure. There are a number of specific behaviors, and it goes back to those 3 questions. And I briefly mentioned that leaders' behavior kind of answers that. So the answer to who are you is a leader's who I really am. And it's a leader who has a fairly balanced ego. This goes back to my earlier slide of hitting that sweet spot of confidence where you're not too meek, but you're also not arrogant. So you're balanced, and that allows you to see others and care about their dignity. But also a leader whose integrity is robust, who, for the most part, really walks a nice line around what I do. What I say is what I do. I can be trusted to follow through on my word and so forth. It's also important when we think of the next question of, where are we going, to think about the direction that the leader is setting. So part of it is the compelling vision. Alan mentioned that. And a vision, I want to amplify the way Alan thinks about a compelling vision, is that it serves all of the stakeholders. And this is a place where a number of leaders fall short. They think about specific goals, often revenue-driven goals, for example, and they have a vision of where they want to go, but they often don't think about what is the impact of that on all of these other stakeholder groups. So Business Roundtable came out last year and said, we need to shift from thinking about shareholder value to thinking about stakeholder value. Who are all of the stakeholders? And a vision becomes compelling when it's really providing for profitable growth, as Alan says, for all of your stakeholders. And with that, strategies that are ethical to get there. And then the final question people have, the do you see me question, is answered by how I treat you as a leader. So I use this phrase, generous inclusion, to capture this idea of, am I bringing in the needs and concerns of all of my stakeholders? And this has a real shift in how we think about leaders, where instead of thinking of them as needing to know everything, needing to control everything, they actually, Marshall, and I'm sure you appreciate this, have to shift more to a coaching and facilitating role, where they're sometimes bringing in people who really have very differing opinions or strongly disagree. The leader now has to facilitate that. And then, just the final piece, having a long-term development focus of people as opposed to just transactional.
Very good. Very good. Now, I think it's a great theory, and I believe it. You've been studying this more than I have. There's just some good research to kind of supports that this isn't just a theory. This is the real world.
Sure. I'm going to just mention a couple of quick things, Marshall. One is, going back to Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, 2001, where his long-term study found that the leaders who moved organizations from good to great compared to a control group of organizations, the leaders in the great organizations had 2 real things in combination. One was strong drive, kind of Alan's spine of titanium, if you will, but they also had personal humility. This notion I'm now defining as being able to display regard for others' dignity. So that was a very strong result based on stock performance of those organizations, revenue growth, and so forth. Another piece of research that comes out of, if you just look at the Gallup organization's annual survey of an employee engagement, at the end of 2018, which was the last year I've seen a report on, the United States, over 30,000 employees were surveyed each year. And in the United States, we hit the highest level of employee engagement we'd ever hit at 34%. That means 66% of employees are showing up to do just a job, deliver the least they have to do, and then get out of here, and are likely to take another job if they have an opportunity. So we're not really bringing out the best capacity in people who are working with the current command and control, or the current style that just doesn't really see others' dignity and bring it into the fold. So that's, just a little bit of background research that shows we've got some work to do.
And one thing that I've often heard is, well, I remember I worked for so-and-so and they were incredibly arrogant, yet they were successful. Therefore, arrogant leaders are better. And in my book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, I try to make one point. We all have in life what I call a because of and an in spite of. And we've all worked for successful people who were incredibly arrogant. The key is they weren't successful because they were arrogant. They were successful in spite of the fact that they were arrogant. There's no research that shows that arrogance leads to success, but we often make this mistake. This person was arrogant, they were successful, therefore arrogance is a good thing. No, this person was successful. Let me give you one example. I worked for one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in the R&D world, and he was a good human being in terms of integrity. And he was brilliant. In fact, that was his downfall. He was almost always right. And when people would disagree with him, he had a tendency to put them down, to make little comments. And after a while, they just quit disagreeing. And by the way, he had high integrity. He would never sacrifice patient care. Well, then one day, he was always right till he was wrong. He was always right till he was wrong. And what happened is the company came up with a product and the FDA had problems with it. And he said, no, I'm right. And no one challenged him. The company lost half their market cap, billions of dollars in a day because of this event. And then when they interviewed his employees, did you think there was a problem? Many of them said, yeah. Why didn't you say something? Well, he said it was the right answer. He's a smart guy, he's usually right. And if I challenged him and I couldn't outdo his argument, he put me down. Billions of dollars disappeared that day.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Just what you're talking about, Marilyn, just what you're talking about. So, Marilyn, let's talk about how this applies at scale, how you can use this at a big level.
This was one of the parts of the book that I had the most fun with. I actually interviewed a dozen CEOs of mostly large companies, big brand companies, because I wanted to see, can this work in large organizations? There's certainly large organizations where the CEO may not have humility, but the amazing thing is, kind of like Jim Collins' work, to find people who do have leader humility and really go in and take a look at how strong that organization is performing and how thriving it is. So yes, it works. Alan sitting here this morning is an example, having been CEO of Boeing Commercial Airplanes and having been CEO of Ford Motor Company and driving wonderful financial performance in both of those companies, but also a kind of loyalty that is almost Alan's brand. There are people who would go to the ends of the earth to do what this particular leader wanted them to do because he galvanized the whole organization around that. But I also talked with, for example, Jim Sinegal of Costco, who is a co-founder and long-term CEO of that company and grew it to be this multinational, very large company, over 250,000 employees. And one of the fascinating things I always heard Costco leaders who came through our program say was just what a great culture it was, and how much they really believed in the leadership of that company. They still do. And it's just been wonderful to see how you can grow an organization to that size without advertising. They simply delivered value, and Jim, in his very humble way, built a culture of do the right thing, making sure you take care of your people, and they in turn grow the organization. So I interviewed a dozen leaders of this type, and it was just amazing to see the confirmation of how much value they can drive in an organization. And Marshall, I think to your point about an arrogant leader not being successful because of the arrogance, the other side of that is we're not looking at how much success we're missing. What more could happen if that person were not arrogant?
I love that thought. I love that thought. You know, Alan, Marilyn, you're a new member, but Alan is also a member of our wonderful 100 Coach organization. Had the opportunity to hang around with amazing people, Francis Hesselbein, who we just love, and just a bunch of great leaders. And one of the ones is Hubert Joly, CEO of Best Buy. And Hubert is a great believer in feed forward, and he really stands up in front of everybody and says, my name is Hubert Joly. I need to get better at. He always has something to improve. Please give me ideas to help me. And he has every employee in Best Buy practice feed forward. Every employee stands up and says, my name is, I want to get better. Please help me. Now, Alan, you're a great believer in this, an advocate of this, and you're a big supporter of this book. You got involved. You wrote part of the book. I love what you've written. What got you involved in this, and what made you excited about it? Because you got a couple, three things you could be doing with your time. So why this?
Well, I think you really get really close to it yourself, Marshall. I know you know, and it's fun to share. But I'll just start with one of the elements of Marilyn's point about humility, and especially not only who you are as a person, especially being a facilitator and a coach, and leading with humility, love, and service. Being courageous, disciplined, and then on the where we're going, that the power of what she's saying about a compelling vision where we're coming to work now, not for a salary, but we're coming together to build a cathedral, something that's going to benefit not only ourselves, but the greater good. And then the part about do we see them? Does the leader see them? And the inclusion part is incredible. Not only inclusion as we've thought about it with the employees, but also with all the stakeholders, the customers, the investors, the community in which we live. Is everybody included? And then that development focus that she just described, because in working together, as we know, it's about growing the business for the good of everybody, for all the stakeholders. And so it has a tremendous development focus, meaning that not only are we growing the business, which is the development year over year, but we're also developing the team individually and as a team. And talk about the value of seeing us, that each one of us has a plan to not only improve our technical competencies, but also our humility, our love, our service, our discipline, and also our inclusion. And so that's part of the business that we scale up to make use of this fundamental of leadership humility.
You know, I'd like everybody listening right now to be thinking about questions, because we're going to be coming to a Q&A section at the end. So everybody be thinking about some good questions for Marilyn or Alan or me or whatever. Be thinking about some questions on this general topic of leader humility. Leader humility. And let's talk about our own lives. Marilyn, how have you seen humility to be an asset for you in terms of leadership, in terms of service?
I put it really in a couple of different buckets, but it's very similar behaviors across both. And one was just my career when I was, leading executive programs at Seattle University, and you're working with faculty who have very strong and often differing opinions, trying to do program development work, or whether you're working with students some of those who want to learn and grow, some of those who need to learn and grow, even if they may not want to, or with my team, the people who helped run the center. And I think the importance of understanding that other people have a sense of self-worth, and that if you pull along with that, if you sort of run in parallel with their sense of self-worth, you get much more success and contribution for the organization than if you are opposed to that and you're stepping all over their dignity. So that was one way in which I've seen it show up. And then the other is, I think this concept relates to all relationships. I've seen it in my family. I've seen it with friendships, with neighbors. There is no human relationship I can imagine where violating another person's dignity is part of a healthy relationship. It's just not.
Yeah, Marilyn, that's a fantastic point. I mean, help more, judge less. How many of us have friends and family members who would like us all to help a little more and judge a little bit less, be a little less arrogant, have a little more humility? That's good for everybody, and it's good at all levels. And the other thing is, from a very practical point of view, and Alan, I love the idea of compliance and standards around this, the world is changing. And dysfunctional behavior used to be a whole lot more, quote, acceptable than it is today. Let me give an example. Alan, you know some of the great medical doctors in our 100 Coach program. We've got Dr. Noseworthy, who you know was head of the Mayo Clinic. You're on the board. And we've got, we got Dr. Pisters from MD Anderson. And we've got wonderful Dr. Downing from St. Jude's Children's Hospital, wonderful medical doctors. And in the old days, medical doctors used to yell and scream and insult at interns and just be rude. And it was seen as kind of like part of life, almost a hazing process. And what they've had to deal with today is you just can't do that anymore. That level of arrogance produces what's called a toxic workplace environment. It goes to the board of directors, and that behavior is just no longer tolerable. So I do think that we are in a new world. So there are a lot of reasons to learn these things. And one of them is just basic compliance. You can't behave that way anymore in the new world. And I think it's probably a good thing for all that you can't. Now, I know we've got a lot of questions. So Justin, if you don't mind taking over now, and let's share some questions with Alan and Marilyn.
Hello. Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm going to get the first one here from Janet Williams. It's from Hepler, Seattle. And she asks, Marilyn, do you have any kind of examples of how to hold others accountable to this important trait of leader humility?
Yes, Alan Mulally is one of my greatest examples, but I've also seen it when I've been leading. And I would say the basic principle is you make the standards clear, both about what the work is that needs to be done, but also about the process we're going to use for getting that work done. And when everybody understands that, and when it's been widely communicated and repeated, then when people are outliers and they're not getting with the program, you need to have that one-on-one conversation with them a couple of times. And then if that's not changing, you need to let them know that it's not changing. And so maybe they need to be aware that they are making some choices, that this might not be the right environment for them. And so, Alan has this famous saying of, it's okay. You're making a choice to kind of move on. I had a slightly different style of doing it, but I think in both cases, it's really making sure you do the walk with that person to understand they are not going to be an exception to the way we are going to work in this organization. And there's such a need for leaders to create both the clarity of the vision and the work we're going to do and the process for how we're going to interact working together to do it.
Alan, you and I have been together working in corporations, and we've seen leaders in front of all their employees roll their eyes when their peers comment, make snide comments, remarks, talk down, make little jokes about people. When one person starts that ball rolling, what happens next?
Well, it's a message and it's a sign that it's okay. And you think about the importance of the way that Marilyn's phrasing this about starting with the leader, humility. You're going to end up developing an entire team that leads with humility, but it starts with the leader. And no matter what you write on a piece of paper, no matter what you say, everybody's going to watch what you do. And if you let the people that are in your organization violate that fundamental principle of respect for others' dignity, then it won't make any difference what you've written down, and the culture will develop along with what they see. So it's really important to agree on those behaviors and also have zero tolerance for violating them. Just one comment about what Marilyn and you said about me and the word okay. It was never in a way to be mean, because as Marilyn said, we always made the behaviors perfectly clear. And so, and I also know, and you know, that these are fundamental behaviors that people should be treated this way, and we want to be treated this way. And so it really is okay if you don't want to move in this direction of creating the high performance, safe, efficient, healthy organizations. It's okay. You're probably going to be happier somewhere else. And until then, we'll help you every way we possibly can, but we're never going to allow this behavior to continue.
Very good. Very good. All right, Justin, what's another great question for Marilyn or Alan?
Okay, so real quick, Marshall, thanks for queuing me up there. Really enjoying the conversation, and it appears our audience is as well. We have well over 400 questions and comments right now, which very clearly we can't get to them all. I really wish we could. It's fantastic. The feedback and comments are phenomenal. And for those of you out there watching, just know that Marshall, Marilyn, and Alan will be going through the comments feed on LinkedIn and the other places where we broadcast this, and looking to engage with you directly. So if we don't answer your question or respond to your comment right away, know that we will be looking at those, and we'll be seeing there as well. So speaking of leader humility, right? This question comes from Riza Speake from, it looks like, Izmir, Turkey. And Riza asks, to Marilyn, you've got 3 questions, right? Of those 3 questions that you talked about earlier, which one is the most important?
Wow. Thank you for that, Justin and Riza. Many people feel that the most important question is, do you see me? Because it's the one that's closest to your sense of dignity. And if a leader doesn't see you, doesn't see who this individual is with their sense of self-worth, they're not going to be able to create a strong working relation. People are very aware when they're just being seen transactionally, but they're not being seen as a full human being. And that doesn't mean a leader needs to know everything about that person or their personal life. But it does mean if we're working together for several months, maybe you want to know who my spouse is, or if I have children, if I'm dealing with a parent who is ill or aging, if I'm juggling childcare and have a sick child, maybe you want to know that I have aspirations to grow, and maybe I could do that in this organization, or if not, maybe you could help me get some skills that would help my longer term career. So do you see me is really getting at, who is this person working with you? And if you want to get their full heart, mind, energy, spirit involved in working together for the compelling vision you're setting, you need to know who that person is and be able to support that sense of self-worth. So do you see me is the question most of us care about, maybe most importantly.
You know, I'm going to reinforce what Marilyn just said. This is very deep, and it goes way back into our history as human beings. Back in the cave, how would you ultimately get rid of people? You don't acknowledge their existence. You don't refer to them. You don't look at them. You pretend they're not there. That is kind of the ultimate insult to another person. The ultimate insult is not even yelling and screaming at someone. The ultimate insult is you pretend they're invisible. The leader I gave feedback to that got the lowest scores on respect I've ever seen, 0.1 percentile from both direct reports and peers. I reviewed his feedback. He would be on an elevator with someone and they'd say, "Hey, Joe, how's it going?" And he wouldn't even respond. He wouldn't even look up. He wouldn't even look at them. He would just keep reading his reports. And to me, that is kind of the ultimate insult to another person. And so, Marilyn, what you're saying there, do you see me? At some existential level, that's a very deep concept. Because the opposite of that is you don't even see me. Think about what that means. That's very deep. Very, very deep.
Personal.
So thank you. Justin.
Right. I have a couple great quick questions for you. This one comes from India. It looks like from Pune, India. It's from Shailesh Debol and says, is humility and leader humility specifically culture specific?
Good question. I would say that it's universal in the sense that all humans have and need a sense of self-worth, and leaders need to get that, and that there are cultural differences in how we behave towards others that would be considered normal or normative. And so all of us would expect to be treated, at the very least, the baseline being what a normal level of respect for us should be. And let me give you maybe an example of that. In some countries, the United States maybe being one of them, there has, we certainly have not evolved to gender equality, but there has been more emphasis on the rights of women in the workplace and the growth of women in the workplace and the need for parity. And so a woman in this culture would be expecting to be treated in certain ways, where in some other cultures where that might be a newer conversation or even a conversation that hasn't started yet, what might be acceptable to a woman might be different. So I think you'll see differences in what normal expected behaviors are. And even there, all of us would welcome being treated better. But at the very least, we would look for what's normative for our culture.
Great answer. Next question.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. This one comes from Bangalore, from Sejan Zacharias. And Sejan's curious, when we come across an arrogant leader in our own organization or in our lives, and we want to help them, how can we change that person or help them adjust so that they become the leader they should be?
I wish I had a magic wand, and I don't. You could give them a copy of my book and hope they read it. Maybe form a discussion group at work. That is a hard one to change. And I think, in chapter 9 in the book, I talk about how humility is developed or formed. And there's really two essential components, one being self-awareness and the other being a willingness, your choice to grow in this arena. If somebody has both of those things, then you can begin to help them come along with it by giving them more information about how it really works. If they lack the self-awareness, or if they simply enjoy arrogance and they don't want to let that go, it can be really hard to move them. And so you have to try to work around that. My hope is that we can start a humility revolution, a movement, and get more and more leaders to recognize the real value, the way we improve results in the workforce and in other kinds of organizations, whether it's family, government, whatever, but the way we get better results when we start behaving as if others' dignity really matters, because it does.
Now, Marilyn, speaking of humility, you've got a pretty tough job there being an associate dean. I had that job when I was about 29. I lasted for about 1 year, and that was about it for me. And, Marilyn, you have a lot of education. I have a lot of education. Alan has a lot of education. And in our lives, I think one reason this is so hard, and I'd like to get your reflections on it, To be fair, we have taken test after test after test after test. And thousands of times, Marilyn, this is true for you too. How many times have you had to prove how smart you were? Over.
Oh, many times.
And over
Yeah.
and over again. It can be hard to stop. It can be very hard to stop. It's so deeply ingrained to prove that we're smart, to prove we're right. Give me a couple ideas and these are good people. Alan, the people that we deal with in our 100 Coaches program, these are wonderful people. But Alan, are these dumb people or typically smart people? Oh, real smart. They're real smart. It can be hard for smart people not to prove how smart we are over and over. And, you know, I have a PhD, my wife has a PhD, my daughter has a PhD. I'm very familiar with this problem. And I've been in faculty meetings before, Marilyn. I'm sure you have too. Sometimes there seems to be an inverse correlation between people's knowledge of a topic and the vehemence of their opinions. Well, how do you deal with real smart people and really communicate to them? You don't always have to be so smart. Alan, you got your hands up. Got an idea on that one?
Oh, I just makes my heart flutter. I think it goes back. One thing that for all of us just to kind of think about in this rapidly changing world is the opportunity for us working together to make a difference for the greater good in so many areas of our world is unprecedented. And at the most fundamental level, we are going to make the biggest difference, and we're going to be the most effective at working together if we have the hearts and the minds of all the participants, of all the stakeholders. And clearly, we all know, we've all been there, we know what it's like when we've been treated with respect, when people have respected our dignity, have wanted us to be on the team, have wanted our help, have wanted our enthusiasm, our contribution individually, and also our teamwork. And we all know what can be done, unbelievable things that can be done if we choose to work together. And it starts with humility by the leader and all the participants. What an opportunity we have, you guys.
Wonderful. Marilyn, your reflections.
I would echo what Alan says. I think we are in troubled times, Marshall. I mean, taking this beyond business, we've got a pandemic in this country, actually around the world, although we're leading the world in one of the ways we probably shouldn't be, which is not doing a good job on this. We have economic challenges, we have social challenges, we have climate issues, we have immigration issues. There's just so many complex, big issues that are facing our world right now and are going to affect generations to come. And we need to start tackling those and really working together on how we are going to resolve those problems now. And how do you bring together people who have such vastly differing views and maybe different motives, different needs? We've got to start inviting people to a rather large table, if you will, and having leaders, because those are the people we turn to guide us through these changes, but having leaders who have the humility to really know how to facilitate those conversations, respecting people's differences, but helping them be part of the solution by stressing the urgency of it and helping us work together to come up with those ideas. I think the potential of this topic is certainly important, and it's ripe for business, but it's also ripe in a much larger worldly context. And I hope that people would make that connection and run with it.
Very good. Now, final comment. First, thank you to all of our viewers and listeners here. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure Marilyn and Alan do. You can get Marilyn's book wherever you get books. And I really appreciate everyone tuning in. It's the first time we've ever gotten 400 questions, which is amazing. So we must have 12 tons of viewers on the show, which is a compliment, Marilyn, to you and to the work that you're doing. Finally, I mean, to me, the mission in life is pretty simple. Make a positive difference for real people in the real world that you know, if one person's life is a little better because they met me, I'm declaring victory here. And, you know, so Marilyn, my life is better because of you. And Alan, my life is certainly better because of you. So, you know, thanks to both of you so much. And finally, back to a real practical point of view, what's one thing in this book that you can feel help the readers make a positive difference in their lives? Just one little thing. Marilyn, you go, and then Alan, you go.
I think realizing that humility is important not only for leaders, but for all of us in every relationship that we have, that there's a dance between our humility and another person's dignity, and framing your interaction in a way that doesn't step all
about how we're treating people and what it means to them and to the organization about how we do that. And I think that Marilyn says very clearly, and I agree, and Marshall, we've seen it around the world, is that who you are as a person, starting with your humility, is going to have more to do with your leadership effectiveness than anything else.
Well, finally, thank you so much, Marilyn. Thank you so much, Alan. Very honored to be with both of you today. Thank you to so much for all of our viewers.
Thank you.
This is thank you. This is going to be recorded. It's going to be recorded. It's going to be on my LinkedIn go to my LinkedIn posts. If you go to my posts, I'm going to do another 2 hours tonight on leadership. So, Alan, I'm going to be quoting you tonight in my talk, as always. So I'm going to another session tonight. So thank you both so much. And by the way, both of you are making the world a better place. So thank you for all you're doing. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Marshall. We really appreciate it. Thank you.